The divine economy, a widow's faith that moved heaven. Come closer, child. I know what they did to you. I know the betrayal, the wound that still aches when no one sees. You've been told to forgive, but it feels impossible, too unfair, too painful. Yet I have come to show you a freedom deeper than your hurt. Stay with me in this story, and you will see how I turn pain into peace, chains into release, and hatred into a miracle of love. Before this video ends, you may discover the power to forgive the unforgivable and finally be free. Subscribe now and let me guide you deeper into healing and hope. My friend, there is a currency in my kingdom that holds more value than all the gold of the earth. It is not measured by its quantity, but by the cost of its giving. It is the currency of sacrificial faith. I was sitting in the treasury of the temple in Jerusalem. This was the place where great bronze chests, shaped like trumpets, stood waiting to receive the offerings of the people. It was a loud public place, filled with the bustling noise of commerce, the clanking of coins, and the self-congratulatory chatter of the wealthy. My disciples were with me, their eyes wide, watching the powerful men, the religious leaders, the merchants, the wealthy Sadducees, approach the trumpets. These men made a show of their giving, dropping heavy bags of money with a deliberate echoing clang that announced their generosity to everyone nearby. They were giving out of their abundance, measuring their piety by the sound of their donations. But I was not watching the men, I was watching their hearts. And in the midst of that deafening display of wealth, my attention was seized by a tiny, silent figure, a woman who held the profound secret of faith. It is the story of the widow's mite, and it will redefine everything you thought you knew about success and sacrifice. The scene in the temple treasury was one of spectacular abundance. The wealthy men, the Pharisees and the Sadducees, draped in fine linen and robes of status, approached the offering chests with great ceremony. Imagine the noise, my friend. The coins they donated were silver and gold, heavy and numerous, as they tossed their contributions into the wide, trumpet-shaped openings. The metal struck metal, creating a loud, gratifying clamor that reverberated across the court. Every person within earshot knew who was giving and how much they were giving. These men lived their ordinary lives defined by surplus. Their inner monologues were filled with calculation and comparison. If I give 5 talents, perhaps they will seat me closer to the front during the next feast. If I give enough to repair the outer wall, my name will be etched into the stone for all time. I am prosperous because I am disciplined. My prosperity is a visible sign of God's favor. My generosity is a reflection of my righteousness. Their offerings were substantial, genuine contributions to the maintenance of the temple, the priesthood, and the community. They gave many things, and they gave them publicly. They were doing exactly what society expected, what the law encouraged, and what religious piety demanded. Their giving was an impressive display of philanthropic duty. My disciples, watching this spectacle beside me, were deeply impressed. Master, they must have thought, look at the weight of those donations. Look at the support these men are giving to the Father's house. This is true dedication. This is genuine worship. They measured the giving by the size of the pile, the sheer, quantifiable volume of the gift. But I looked past the pile. I saw the vast, untouched reserves in the merchants' treasuries. I saw the accounts that remained full after the offering was made. I saw that their substantial gift represented a mere ripple in their ocean of wealth. It cost them nothing essential. It demanded no change in their lifestyle. It required no true trust in the Father for their future provision. Their giving was a beautiful garment covering a hollow heart. It was the ordinary life of the rich, giving out of their surplus, never into their need. Their actions were loud, but their faith was silent. Refrain of encouragement. My friend, do you measure your worth by your surplus? Do you compare your generosity to those who have more? The Father is not impressed by the size of the pile, but by the size of the sacrifice. Your ordinary life is a test of what you truly believe. Stop listening to the clamor of the world's praise and listen to the quiet reckoning of your own heart. The loud clanging of silver and gold briefly subsided. The disciples turned their heads, waiting for the next notable dignitary to make his magnificent offering. It was in this moment of brief, expectant silence that the crack occurred. A sound so small, it was almost imperceptible, yet it instantly drowned out all the noise of the rich. She appeared silently, a woman, a widow. In that society, a widow was the picture of vulnerability and poverty. She was stripped of her husband's protection, lacked legal rights, and often existed on the absolute edge of survival. She wore the somber, threadbare clothing of perpetual mourning and need. No one noticed her. She possessed no status, no wealth, and no one would record her name on the donor scrolls. She walked humbly to the trumpet chest, avoiding the eyes of the proud men. There was no fanfare, no clang, no announcement of her arrival. She did not cast a bag of coins. She simply reached into her hand, a hand gnarled by work and worry, and dropped her offering. The sound was not a clang, it was a small, delicate tap-tap, the sound of 2 bronze coins, 2 lepta, settling in the bottom of the vast, empty trumpet. The lepton was the smallest Jewish coin, worth almost nothing. 2 of them were barely enough to purchase a single meager sparrow. The world heard only silence, but I heard the sound of her soul. I immediately called my disciples to me, drawing their attention away from the still full coffers of the rich and focusing their gaze entirely upon the emptying hand of this poor woman. Assuredly, I say to you that this poor widow has put in more than all those who have given to the treasury, for they all put in out of their abundance. But she, out of her poverty, put in all that she had, her whole livelihood. Mark 12:43-44. My statement shattered their worldly calculus. More. The men had donated enough to feed a village for a month. She had given enough to buy half a loaf of bread. Yet, I declared her offering was greater than all of theirs combined. The crack was the realization of a divine economy, where the cost of the gift determines its worth, not the raw dollar amount. The wealthy gave much and retained everything. The widow gave little and retained nothing. The difference was not in the coins, but in the trust. Her inner monologue, unheard by all but me, was not one of despair, but of simple, radical reliance. Father, this is all I have left. I don't know where tomorrow's meal will come from, but I know you are faithful. I cannot trust this metal. I can only trust you. I empty my hands to receive yours. Her offering wasn't a donation. It was a profound act of worship, a naked declaration of complete, absolute dependence on God. It was the sound of a heart willingly jumping off a cliff, knowing that only the Father's hands could catch her. Refrain of encouragement. My friend, what is the lepton in your hand? Is it your last hour of energy, your smallest talent, your final coin? Do not withhold it out of fear. The world measures your safety by what you keep. I measure your faith by what you willingly surrender. That small, silent surrender is the loudest sound in all of heaven. The wealthy men's giving was merely a subtraction from their surplus. It brought them public applause and private security. They walked away feeling generous and safe. The widow's giving was a total, absolute, and terminal act of surrender. This was the breaking point, the moment she transitioned from having something to having nothing. The scripture states, she, out of her poverty, put in all that she had, her whole livelihood. Mark 12:44. This means her donation was not just charity, it was her next meal. It was the money reserved to pay the rent. It was her hedge against starvation. She wasn't just giving up comfort, she was giving up her perceived control over her own survival. The breaking point is terrifying because it requires a profound existential choice. Will I trust the visible, tangible security of my resource or the invisible, intangible promise of God? Imagine the agonizing internal debate this woman must have endured before she reached the treasury. If I give these 2 coins, I am fully exposed. I have no one to rely on. Who will help a poor widow? I must keep one coin, just one, for the extreme emergency. Just one coin for fear's sake. The temptation to keep the smallest possible reserve, the temptation of practical fear, must have been immense. But in that moment, she chose to push past the logic of survival and into the logic of God. She chose to be utterly destitute in the presence of the Father, believing that God's provision was more reliable than her small material store. Her actions laid bare the fatal flaw of the religious elite. They loved God with their wealth, but they trusted their wealth more than God. The widow loved God without her wealth, proving that her trust was placed entirely in Him. This radical surrender, the willingness to face tomorrow with an empty purse because of a full faith, is the essential breaking point that God requires of every follower. Until you reach the point of total dependence, you will always be tempted to divide your trust between your resources and your Creator. The rich gave 10% and kept 90% of their trust in themselves. The widow gave 100% and placed 100% of her trust in God. This total, reckless dependence is what I called more than all. Her two small coins represented the entirety of her heart, her will, and her future hope. Refrain of encouragement. My beloved, stop holding on to your small reserve, the last thread of control, the small comfort you refuse to surrender. It is not the quantity of your sacrifice that restricts you, but the peace of your heart you withhold. You cannot fully grasp the Father's hand if your own hands are still clutching your might. Reach the breaking point of surrender, and you will find absolute, powerful freedom. My teaching immediately caused a radical shift in the perception of my disciples. They were forced to reevaluate their entire understanding of religious success and divine approval. They had been taught by society that piety was proportional to public display and measurable wealth, the size of the offering. I taught them that piety is proportional to self-emptying and unmeasurable trust, the size of the sacrifice. The shift was from external appearance to internal reality. The disciples began to realize that the booming clang of the rich men's coins was merely the echo of their abundance, a loud but shallow sound. The soft tap-tap of the widow's lepta was the sound of her survival, a quiet sound that contained the deep, prophetic truth of true faith. They experienced a sudden, humbling realization. They had been admiring the wrong thing. They were standing beside the King of Kings, yet their eyes were still captivated by the world's gold. I was forcing them to look at the spiritual X-ray of the heart, rather than the surface performance. This shift defines the fundamental ethics of my kingdom. 1. Reversal of values. What the world deems poor and small, God deems infinitely valuable. The last shall be first. The lowest coin is the highest worship. 2. The currency of intention. The Father judges the motive behind the gift, not the gift itself. The gift is merely the vehicle for the faith. 3. Dependence is wealth. The woman who became completely dependent on God became, in a spiritual sense, the richest person in the court that day. She owned nothing, but she possessed everything because she possessed the unwavering commitment of her Father's provision. The widow, in her quiet, courageous action, became the greatest theological teacher in the temple. She redefined the relationship between man and God. She taught that true prayer is not begging for more resources, but risking what you have because you are certain of the Father's character. My friend, this is the radical shift I call you to today. Stop basing your faith on what you see in your bank account and start basing it on what you know about my character. When you stop trying to be the provider and accept that you are the receiver, you step into the limitless resources of the kingdom. This shift allows you to trade the burden of provision for the blessing of reliance. Refrain of encouragement. Do you hear the silence after the surrender? That is the sound of my absolute guarantee. I am calling you away from the world's loud, demanding systems of abundance. Your safety is not in your savings, your security is in your submission. Shift your focus from your lack to my limitless supply. The ultimate purpose of this seemingly small encounter was to establish the model of perfect faith for all generations. When my disciples asked, "What does faith look like? How much do we need to give?" I pointed not to the mighty contributions of the priests, but to the emptying hand of the poorest woman. This encounter served several key purposes. 1. To correct misplaced trust. The primary goal was to shatter the illusion that wealth and religious standing confer special favor with God. I showed that external piety, the Pharisees' loud giving, is useless if the heart's trust remains divided. The widow's act was the perfect antithesis to the Pharisees' prayer. She was utterly honest about her need. 2. To define true sacrifice. The term sacrifice had become ritualized. I redefined it as an act that genuinely costs the giver something vital. The cost is the measure of the gift. The wealthy gave without feeling it. The widow gave and felt the immediate physical pain of the loss. Her sacrifice was not religious, it was existential. 3. The model for the cross. The widow's complete emptying of herself foreshadows my own imminent act. Just as she held nothing back, I was about to give my whole livelihood, my very life, to pay the debt of humanity. Her 2 small coins were the tiny reflection of my infinite sacrifice. She gave her entire means of living. I gave the very essence of life itself. 4. The empowerment of the marginalized. By exalting the poorest and most vulnerable person in the court, I sent an unmistakable message to the world. Status and wealth are irrelevant to the Father. The greatest heroes of faith are often those operating in the background, making sacrifices that no human eye sees or acknowledges. My friend, do not ever think your contribution is too small, your prayers too simple, or your sacrifice too insignificant. The Father sees what others ignore. He sees the struggle, the vulnerability, and the courageous choice you make to put your total trust in Him. Even when the future is dark, the widow's mite is the eternal validation that you are seen, you are valued, and your smallest act of surrender moves the hand of the Almighty. The story of the widow's mite is a direct, enduring challenge to your heart's deepest fears and your world's most prized values. It forces a fundamental reckoning. Are you waiting until you have enough surplus to be truly generous? If so, you will never be generous, for the feeling of enough never arrives. Do you secretly believe that the size of your offering determines the size of my blessing? If so, you are a merchant, not a worshiper. The impact of the widow's faith is this: you are invited to live a life of courageous vulnerability. Stop hiding your struggle. Stop pretending you have a large reserve. Be honest with me about your need, and then, with absolute trust, give me the little bit you have left, your broken time, your weary spirit, your tiny financial means. When you surrender your lepta, you're not giving to an institution. You are casting your entire future hope upon my character. And I promise you this: the Father who rewarded the widow's total surrender will never, ever allow the one who fully trusts Him to be abandoned. Your freedom begins when your hands are empty, because that is the only posture capable of receiving the boundless riches of heaven. You have walked with me through this story and felt the weight of forgiveness lift. This freedom is what I came to give. Do not let bitterness hold you one more day. Walk with me. Keep learning to live free and whole. Subscribe and stay close. Each story I tell will guide you deeper into healing and hope. You are loved, you are seen, and you are never alone.